Let us see some examples, or maybe we'll get familiarized with Xcode. Okay. Once you open your Xcode, you should be getting, maybe I'll close the project. You should be seeing this screen once you start. So this is actually showing the last opened applications, if at all, if you had created any project, that will be listed down in this pane. Or you can proceed creating file, new project. Okay. Once you pick a new project, few things. First, you make sure you are in iOS and selected applications. So if you see that these are all the other application you can create using Xcode, watchOS, tvOS, OS X, OS X for desktop class devices, tvOS for TV, Apple TV, and watchOS. Of course, Apple has a watch as well. This is for iOS, which is for iPhones, iPad, on all the variants, and iPod Touch as well. There are template available, for example, master detail application where the navigation, left navigation and the right content appears, or page based one, swipeable. There are a couple of templates available, but I would want you to start with a single view application. We will go back to the templates, or probably we will change the single view application into those template based design. We will add the tabs or whatever it is manually as we progress. Today, certain thing I would like to tell, where you get used to Xcode environment. At least you should be able to create a simple Hello World application. So make sure you create single view application. It's a kind of template. You can give your name. Any name you can give. So pseudo name. These are all quite not something quite important, but the identifier is very important. Always make sure it is slightly unique and separated by dot, maybe 2 or 3 dots. This is actually an identifier for your application in App Store. You know that Apple has an App Store through which the application could be distributed. So application name is not a unique identity. That particular identifier you are giving for your application is an identity for it. Like a student roll number, how it would make the student name unique. So identify in a group of record. This should be unique. Make sure you slightly create a complex pattern, because enormous applications are there in the market, and it should be quite unique. And languages, by default Swift or Objective-C, depending on your version. The latest version by default makes the Swift as a default application, but whatever. But anyway, we're going to see both, but at least to start with Objective-C. And devices, which one you are trying to target. Universal, in this case, you are not targeting one particular device. You would like to make a common design so that it works in iPad or larger screen, or a smaller screen such as iPhones and iPods. And these are all stuff like core data. It's a NoSQL one, like a SQL engine which is there inside your iPhone, which we have already similar thing we have already seen, IndexedDB. Similar to that, here we call it core data. It will prepare certain classes for you so that you can directly start using it. Okay, as of now, I really don't want to touch the defaults. Let it be, and then we'll come back to that. What is that? How to test, and of course how to use the core data whenever required. Click next. You may choose to keep everything in a folder wherever you want. So I kept it in a folder. I just created XApp something, and I'm going to keep my projects over there. So whatever folder you prefer, make sure you create a folder, write all your projects into the same folder wherever you want, and just proceed create. So a lot of things it did, in fact. The left pane, for example, in this particular pane, it is called Project Navigator. And the right side, you're going to see the active area where these select or whatever you selected in the project pane, that respective information will appear in the right. And this is what your application various settings. Like, this is your identifier. You just you typed in that one. Once you try to create the very first project, the identifier along with your name has been appended, and the version, team. For example, if you are a registered Apple developer, in fact you are not at this point, that particular information will appear here. I have already connected with my App Store account, so those things will appear. And these are all the basic settings. Deployment target, always make sure it is the highest one, because largest today is we have a 9.2 iOS version released, and the periodic updates will come. The highest one usually contains a backward compatibility with the previous one. So, but if you have a specific requirement, you can lower it down whatever is required. And universal, of course, I am trying to target for a multi-form factor devices. The main interface means there is a storyboard exists, and this is the launching one. By default, it has created. I'll come back what is that storyboard in a few minutes. And the orientation, what are the orientation you are allowing to your application to appear, like portrait, landscape, left, right. If the user changes the orientation, I mean, if you are unchecking others, your application will always remain in portrait. The user, even though if he changes into a landscape mode, that application won't change the orientation. That's it. So the basic settings. And icon sets, by default we have not added any icons, but that's slightly a longer procedure. Any application icon we would like to add, we will add it in some point of time. So this is the starting point, and there are various other capabilities. And for example, uh, I hope to like to tell, iOS is pretty restrictive on running something in background. I'm not saying it is not having that capability, but it's pretty restrictive. Usually background mean, what is the background in our understanding? An application works when it is in foreground, mean I'm seeing that application. But when you click the home button, I hope you know that Apple devices usually contain one single hardware button, home button. Once you click, you are either closing the application or leaving the application in background, whatever happens, it depends. So when application is not visible, Apple decides how long your application run, or that's entirely, you really don't have much control over to it. If your application running throughout and consuming a lot of battery or energy or resource, app, the iOS may choose to shut down your device. Sorry, not your device, your application. So it's like slightly restrictive to preserve the optimum consumption of the battery or resources. In such a case, certain application have the exception. Uh, the internet telephony application, VoIP applications such as Skype or something which is providing you a telephonic call, I mean the voice over internet calls, can run background, and that it has to have a background mode selected on, and see it is asking these are all the application, or your application is to do something with these, like audio, airplay, of course music players, and location updates, or your application has to track the location even though the application is closed, or weather applications such as, so those kind of application, VoIP, and newsstand downloads like news feeds and Bluetooth kind of stuff, and remote notification. These kind of eligible applications only is allowed to have a background process. If your application, assuming you are creating an application called calculator, that application doesn't make any sense to run in the background, because the calculator works only when it is in the foreground. So there, if you select on and you submit your application, and Apple will review it and say why you want a background application permission. Your application nature doesn't look like it has to run in the background. Your application may be rejected. So Apple is pretty restrictive on certain things. Remember, once you create your application, you have to generate the executables. We usually tell that IPA files, or maybe there are something which could be installed on the iPhone. It has to be submitted through iTunes to App Store, Apple App Store. Once it is submitted, Apple takes a week's time, maybe 7 working days, to review your application, and they'll do an internal testing and calculate how much memory and other how which way you have done the program. Does it violate any licensing terms? various information or various thing would be put into as a case and will be validated against it. Once Apple find everything is fine, then they will approve it and your application will be available in App Store. This is a process. It's a lot of restrictions are there. I've seen a lot of developers writing an application but without worrying certain thing and keep some sort of nested loops or something not necessarily required. They write the program logic slightly too cumbersome and make the application somehow working and submit to the app store. Apple duty will reject it because they are not actually seeing how you have done the coding. In fact, the executable, that of course they cannot see the code, but the way you access the resources matters to them. If they feel this particular application is going to access more memory than their limitation, what they have an option to reject it. Or if your application access certain internal APIs which is not documented, but still you somehow found it to make it work, that will also the reason the Apple may choose it to reject. There are various stuff. But anyway, so this particular screen you can set things on or off, and there are various things. We will come back where whatever required keychain sharing, and this is something like Apple gives you a secured memory area, encapsulated area where you can save the preference data. I hope you remember local storage, session storage kind of stuff. So it gives you access. Technically, login information we could save there, or for example, if you notice, if your application you are selling into the app store, the user once install and suddenly uninstall the device particular program and again installs, and that point of time we would like to identify whether this user is a returning user because he has already installed and some time back he uninstalled, but he is again installing. The user will still get back from where he left and again he can start. So certain critical information I can save in the keychain, and the keychain is a cloud connector. Your Mac machine, if you are saving certain password, that can also be synced with that. Mac machine means personal MacBook Pro, whatever you are saving. And a lot of information that can be saved, and credit card information, or a lot of information is highly encrypted. There are plenty of stuff. Health kit, Apple with a Nike brand, they have a healthcare application and can keep tracking your various activities, how much you walk, how much you run, what kind of speed, what is your day-to-day activity, various stuff it can track. And in-app purchase and map, if your application uses a map, that also has to be it's like a permission kind of stuff. So iCloud, of course, iCloud is most of the Apple device users, maybe 5 GB or something, it's being given for free if you have an iPhone device or maybe Mac, which is you can save your photos, videos, or various stuff 5 GB free, and that can be synced with your device. Push notifications is quite familiar, you may be knowing it. Like your WhatsApp or whatever messenger kind of application. When application is closed, you'd like to, when the message is received, you'd like to put a notification on the top. So various permission you have to define here. Apple Pay, which is a new one. Of course, starting from iPhone 6 onwards, Apple comes with an NFC chip on board, near field communication chip. So it's like near field communication. Most of the Android phone contains NFC chip built in. So when two compatible NFC devices comes closer or maybe slightly tap each other, a communication can be established. And that is being, or in future, now it is started, it could be used for making the payments, and it's been already been done, but not in a large number. So your phone could become like a credit card. So keep your phone, the point of sale device, there may be some here, just tap it, your payment could be made, or authorize, and through your phone things could be made. So the NFC could exchange the data whenever things coming closer to the device. Two compatible NFC devices would have to come. So the Apple Pay and other stuff, in-app purchase, this is also a new thing. For example, if you're creating a game, Angry Bird or whatever, assuming, The initial version is free to be downloaded, but each level as you go, levels are you need to buy, because this is how that in the industry getting closer to you, they make you quite excited and make you addicted. And one point you will say, what is that level? Let's buy it. So those kind of purchases we try to give. I mean, the payment processing inside an application, that's called in-app purchase. So you can charge the user when certain level of conditions or certain level of subscription you'd like to make. You can make use of in-app purchase option. Apple will process your payment behalf of you. They will charge certain commission and then give it to you. So this is how things are working. Maps. Apple has its own mapping API, Apple Map. How accurate, that's debatable. But of course, Google also has iOS SDK released for Map, so that can also be used, or built-in the Map API can also be used. Background modes I just talked about, in-app audio like buying music, and lot of information, data protection. It's like a permission area. So at this point, I really don't see any requirement, but all requires. And there are other things, so too technical stuff, build settings. I would like to tell not to touch this point until you have a clear idea about what you're doing. A lot of configuration settings. We may do it here and there, certain configuration. For example, few years back, Apple gave the automatic reference counting. I was talking about ObjectiveC is that memory reference counting is manual, and that was a bigger stopping stone for a lot of developers. That to high-level programming developers such as Java or C# people, they don't even have an idea about what is the memory or something. But maybe C++ guy pointers, that idea they may be having. But these people would have lost the control of how to manage the memory. So Apple added automatic reference counting. So yes, you can treat it as if create an object, forget, and Apple will automatically manage the references and require certain configuration. You can set it on or off here. So a lot of stuff. That part I don't want you to touch at this point. And here, this build phases. If you are having certain executable, certain, for example, pre-compiled code which you are trying to use, somebody would have created an API. For example, if you use this code, you can get a map done. So they will create a kind of compiled zip version or something. They can give you. You can attach additional binary files here. In one of our example, I'm going to use map example using Google Map API in iOS. That time Google would give you a binary executable which has to be added over here. So because they want to keep it protected still, but still expose the feature to the developers. So those kind of additional stuff we could attach here. So we will come back whenever required in this area. Other than that, this folder structure may be slightly different across a different version of your Xcode. May I know what version of Xcode has been installed here for you? For me, it is 7.2. Even I yet to upgrade it. What's the version? 7 point? Slightly older one. Sorry, I pressed the Mac. So the latest one is 7.2. You can run an upgrade. Just all you need to check for update, it will automatically update. But it may be due to your internet proxy setting and other stuff. It may have been restricted. But okay, 7.x, that itself a positive thing. 6.x I remember seeing some time back. Thankfully, it is not there. A lot of changes have been done. Or some of we both same into a kind of a similar version at this point. Okay. So here, ObjectiveC convention, AppDelegate, view controller, storyboard, launch screen storyboard. A lot of Greek and Latin started now. I mean, these things are quite new to start with, but one thing I am pretty interested to show you, main.storyboard. Okay. Let me hide this pan. Okay, if you see this this particular extreme top right, There you can slightly control. For example, I don't want to see this right pane. You can click it. It will go. And like to don't want to show this project navigation or whatever it is, you can click that. So depending on it, you can have the perspective slightly modified. Okay, now I have clicked the main dot storyboard. If you see that, that's why if you could really highlight it, maybe I will click it. Okay, something, a view kind of thing, it looks like a whiteboard or something like this. Is where you are going to create your user interface. This is something, an arrow tells us this is the very first screen. Mean there is no previous thing. We call that as a segues path. So this particular thing tells there is nothing previous, mean this is the launching screen, and what you put here is going to be displayed. And how the UI components can be added here, it's pretty simple. If you see then the right pane, button, label, switch, text input, all stuffs are drag and drop, you can create your wonderful UI. So it's pretty simple. But before doing that, I am not doing it, but before doing that I would like to tell a few things. Storyboard is the same idea which I talked in the very beginning, like how my user navigation is going to come. I usually take a piece of paper and draw something and put boxes. Same thing you are going to do it here. It's going to give you the entire application perspective, how the views have been stacked together and from which view to where it is going and how these things going to be managed. So this gives you an entire perspective of your views. And to start with that, before we'll run the code and how to see that, okay, let me bring this part. Once I click on, okay, here, just click on this, that's the very first kind of icon which is telling us the view controller. When you highlight it, if you notice this particular pane changes according to the selection. See, now I am highlighting something else, it is showing different, but when I highlight this one, it's showing different. So it tells this view controller, it's a view which controlled by, for example, if you could connect with our jQuery mobile design, the header that we used as a view controller, I hope I remember, because that's where the viewing navigation guidance were there. Clicking this one next page, clicking this one back page, certain control I maintain on the top. In fact, that was highly influenced by this design. So the view controller gives you a wrapper, and below that it gives a area where the content can be put. Same design pattern we use in jQuery mobile. jQuery mobile header below to the main content, like we added our information. Footer is a kind of a thing we added, but of course if required we'll put it. So this particular thing, it's just a view controller, but there is no control elements at this point, because only if I have another view controller to be shown in another page, okay, view controller page, we could somehow relate it. So each view controller is going to behave as a page. So this is the very first page in my understanding. But the view controller, there is no point of putting a navigation on the top because there is no other pages to be shown. If at all I have to show another page, yes, I need to think about adding them. And another notable factor, this is a free scale design, mean this is neither iPhone form factor or iPad form factor, very generic one. So if I put some content over here, but iPhone device itself may be 1/3 of something. If you see that, I'll come back to that, but iPhone size will be very smaller. So your content may be either located either offshoot, or it may offshoot the view, or it may be inside the view, which in unexpected places. So something we have to work on creating an adaptive design so that the content is shown perfectly alright in any kind of form factor to be used. What we saw in the HTML5 was a responsive design. Mean my box is realigned when the form factor mean header, footer, main, left, right navigation bar we created, but when I reduce it, I brought everything into one by one. That was a responsive design because I adjusted, I changed the design itself. But in this case, I'm not going to change the design, but style, maybe I'm going to make it as a smaller one or maintain the aspect ratio to fit into the required view or maybe the phone screen. Maybe at this point it may be slightly confusing, but let me do a couple of stuff. I've selected my view controller, and once I select this one, if you see that the custom class something it is showing, make sure you are into this one. See that it's highlighted by default. Maybe that there are a couple of other stuffs. The size you can define what is the size. If you change it, that the view controller size will be changed, but here we are not targeting a specific device. We'll come back if I have a specific requirement on this. So there are a couple of things, and placement, sizes, a lot of informations are there. I don't want to spend much time with that. Rather, I'll at least make you comfortable to create a hello world application to start with. Okay, this particular view controller is controlled by this particular class view controller. I mean, this class you may have found already here. Code, source code. I mean, programmatically, this particular view which is you are seeing is an object representation of this particular class. If you put a button, when the button gets clicked, the control can be listened here. Some for example, event listener we wrote in JavaScript. I hope you remember in the HTML file. The HTML code was a wrapper where you put some components, but the result click events were accessed by JavaScript. The same happened. This is a kind of HTML representation, you may assume, but maybe I'm trying to give you a correlation, but that's not the fact. If your view, when it is represented here, if you want to listen any events, that is possible in this code. So maybe it is a JavaScript part of, or the dynamicity part of your view, where you can control, where you can do. So this view controller object is actually representing this particular class. This class is repeated twice. There is a view controller.h and m. This is a style, is a known representation for your C program, like header file and the implementation file. Do you have any idea about them? What is header file? If you know C++. Predefine? Somebody said? Yeah. Yeah, try. Okay. Classes. Okay. It's all technical stuff. I'm just trying to get, concept wise. Header or implementation. Fine. For example, a class in object-oriented program, a class usually a wrapper. In that, various object functions are going to be defined. And the header is a place where it defines the signature or what is all about. For example, header carries the information about, for if you have a notebook, you put a label on the top. So what do? The notebook is what about this notebook? Okay, science book or a homework book, your name. All the stuff, some other information which gives you an overview of, okay, what is that? What is actually doing inside? So this M file is an implementation file, whereas the head carries the information about that particular file. Typically, if you want to have a function defined inside this file, if this function is private or public, is defined by this guy. For example, if you tell S there is going to be a function here, and define an abstract function and implement the function here. In a typical C++ representation, each class is containing an abstract and the implementation added together. So In a high level programming language, you can still create an abstract file separately and implement it wherever required. Similar concept, but in this case, each class, a header contains abstract methods. Abstract method mean what? A function name with no active body, just a name stuff, and implement the function here. That's what it is going to do. The header helps you to identify the function's visibility to other classes. If that particular class is defined over here, other classes can access this application, make the instance and use it wherever required. If it is not exposed here, other classes does not even know whether such a function exists in the particular class or not. Yes, maybe at this point slightly looking difficult, but at least to start with, I'll let you know. If you would like to give a public scope to an object, define it in header so that every other classes would come to know such an object exists. If you would like to give a private scope, don't define anything here. I'll come back. Okay, so this is an interface block, interface start and end. This is the active area, and certain import which is required. Remember, in object-oriented program, everything is inherited by something else. Everything comes from something. In Objective-C, every other stuff which you are going to create, in this case, it is coming from object, NS object we call that. NS object. What is NS? NS mean next step. In fact, we are going to see that. What is our next step? Okay, so view controller, at this point I'll just stop it over here, stating that it is a object representation of your view. Fine. An AppDelegate, it's a starting point. It contains the instance of your window and it defines the life cycle of your view. Once your application is visible and user is seeing the application, the user clicks the home button, the application is invisible. So in between you want to do certain stuff. For example, when the application goes to background, you want to back up the data. You want to save it somewhere. Those kind of entry exit points would be given by this AppDelegate, saying that if you could read the function names, you may slightly get application enter background, application enter foreground, application became active, terminate, certain stuff. It is giving you an idea, saying that when the user click on something, certain code will automatically execute it. That is actually where you can either back up or you could at least aware of what is happening to your application. It's a pretty extensive area. To get into that, we have to understand certain convention of our Objective-C. First point, this is, let me, if I can maximize. URL reverse class type. It doesn't work for me. Okay, I'll check back maybe at this point. The function syntax, if you notice that, minus some symbol is there. Void is coming in the, in your high level programming language which you have learned, that object return type may be coming at the later point of time. It is coming immediately. The name of the function and the argument type and argument, this one. This convention will slightly take little time to get understanding, or you get familiarize yourself, but we'll come back and synthesize. Okay, for example, have you ever used a scenario like getter setters in your program? What is the use of it? Pardon? As something. Pardon? Security. It means. Okay, good. Means you're trying to say there is an object exists, but you are granting a permission only through certain channels. Same stuff here, but we are not going to write get set method exclusively, or maybe in Objective-C. When you define an object over here, just write a line synthesize, mean that object becomes adds a getter setter internally, and you can access it whenever required. We have a long days to go, but at least by seeing your face, I'm 100% sure I'm talking Greek and Latin, so better I restrict myself today with the Hello World application still. Okay, so let me slightly minimize this guy. Okay, view controller is the object representation of this one, fine. And time to start with, I want a basic navigation controller or navigation host as added, at least the front back button something we put. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select this one, the very first view controller. I'm into a main storyboard, main.storyboard, the perspective of your entire view stack. View controller selected, go to editor, editor, click on embed in navigation controller, and we have a tab also, but this example I'm not going to use tab mean the host will be on the bottom. Each tab will have its own navigation, slightly a complicated navigation, but at least to start with I'm going to start with the basic navigation controller. Once I select, in fact something has happened. If you could really see it, the arrow moved to somewhere slightly, mean this is the view, or this is the view control we had it before. It just added one more just before that particular view. One controller has been added. If you notice that it is having the header kind of stuff, and that is going to be embedded into this view controller. Mean I'm just trying to give you a starting navigation so that the back button can be added. Before that, that will make sense if I create one more view controller. Here, let me drag and drop over here. Mean I brought a second page. The first page is already there. I'm trying to show the second page. Mean some button will be clicked and then it will load the second page. That's what my idea. The problem is the second page is not connected. It is isolated, because if you notice that the path which is connecting is missing. So these two does not have any relationship at this point. Okay, let's see how things appear first. So this is your emulation area. Mean you can choose your any different form factor devices and see how things are looking like. Normally I don't have any UI, but I will do one thing. I'll put a label. See, drag and drop quite easy. This guy is not showing up. Okay. Just highlight it, change the value. If you see that it will guide you. If you move it at center midpoint, it is guiding you. You can, this particular thing you can use it to align your content or align your view wherever you require. So I'm just going to put this welcome. Okay. Now I'm going to run this. Okay. It actually running the example, but a very big problem. The welcome is somewhere. This is the code, in fact. Your simulator will run, display. If you see that the header or navigation controller having the navigation bar already added, but the content is slightly offshoot. It's going out of your view because our design, we did not target a specific device. It is a very generic view. This particular form factor is looking so smaller and did not put into the right place. We have to fix that first. Before that, this is a simulator. There are various control. You can click on home button to go into home, and this is where your application, your other application will be there. You can bring it, and this is actually eliminates your hardware home button. So shortcut, see that home button, Shift Command H, and locking the reverse Command L. Command mean in your keyboard it is a Windows keyboard, so equivalent to this one. So get used to shortcuts instead of going to that navigations. Okay, but we have to fix the welcome stuff first. Okay, close. Okay, here we have to fix that. By default, Apple has a couple of suggestions for you. If you see that the small couple of icons, 1, 2, 3, fourth one are starting or extreme left, right for the very first one. It has a lot of constraint information. In that, I'm going to click on reset to selected constraints. Means the constraint, for example, will tell, or in other ways, okay, let me clear everything, clear all constraints. For example, I want to keep this welcome button somewhere in here. It means from right to certain percentage it has to be pushed, from left to certain percentage it has to be pushed, so that it will always appear in the center. Remember in CSS what we did? 0 auto. Left right impulse has been added so that the content appears in the center. And the right, certain like some say 30% up and some 60% down pressure once applied, and it will somehow will come into that. So some sort of constraint you can add so that now it is see from top it maintains some x space so that it will slightly coming down, and this one kept in this point, and the rest is in the center. Now let's see if we could get this guy running. Oh, yeah, in the center. If you do not understand, make sure you hit the reset to suggested constraint. That's all to start with. But you should have a very clear idea when we create a complex design. At least, okay, some x percentage being pushed from the navigation bar, and left right equal impulse being added to bring the into center. But Xcode does it internally. You don't need to define the percentage values, but if you really want to see what is the value has been added, we see that the constraint, it is adding some 62 pixels something, and it kept to the welcome into horizontally center, and this constraint it has added to bring the particular text into always into the same place. If you run the same thing in iPad also, it will be in the same place. If you run in a smaller iPad or iPhone also, it will be in same place. 4 or 5 inch I hope iPhone 5s is a 4-inch screen, 6 and 6s is a 4.7-inch screen, and 6s and 6s plus and 6 plus is a 5.2-inch screen devices, and iPad and other lines up are slightly larger. So these kind of constraint you have to add to bring the device, but if you are not familiar to start with, you can just simply click on reset to suggested constraint. It will automatically try to get into the right place. Okay, so now we are seeing here. Now I would like to load the second page, but no link, it's a dead link. We just stuck over here. There should be a button so that I can go to the second screen. Okay, let me make that thing, slightly hide these guys for some time. Okay, so if you notice this, I have another view controller. This one I would like to load whenever required. Okay, for that I need to add some buttons to perform that particular task. First part, this navigation, I can add a title. For example, just tap on it, you will be given option to type something. So what I'm going to type, page 1, very first page, and navigation item, nothing but a button. A button, navigation item exclusive for navigation controllers, mean the top left and right buttons which we usually put. So I'm just going to drag, sorry, did not come. Okay, so this case, okay, bar button item. This will do. Sorry, it's a bar button. This button, I just added a second button. You have to drag the bar button item. Navigation item is already there, mean nothing but this navigation item which is giving you a wrapper to add a title left and right, which has already been added over here. So I'm just going to I've added a button and renamed it some page 2 something. Now when clicking this button, I would like to load this page. Right, just select this one, command and control together. Once you hold, you will see a small line. This is very important. Okay, I'll leave it. First highlight, hold command and control key and move away. You will get a segue or path, and tell I'm going to land it here. And once you release it, you will give an option, okay, show, click show, I mean show it. Once I select that, you see that the path has been drafted. When I click it, it is highlighting this one, mean this path is for this particular button. Whenever this button is clicked, this path will be called and result will be this particular view controller will be loaded. Convention being selecting your bar button item, clicking on the command control together and start moving your cursor. I mean holding your cursor and your mouse, for example pressing the mouse and go. In that case you have to tell the destination. Once you tell the destination, okay, I'm not going to need it. And this segue, we call that as a segue. Seg, whatever convention, noun, whatever. The segue mean is a path. Mean clicking this button will use this path to land to this particular view controller. Okay, let me say this particular view controller. Let me put a name. Okay, at least we have at least connected. Okay, segue. Once I click on this segue, if you go there, you can give a name. So go to page link. You can give a name for this link if required, identifier, so that you can programmatically call. If you want to compare this with that, in jQuery mobile, we use data href anchor tag to define the destination in href to move to the second page. Whereas we had another option using our JavaScript, we can use the mobile container, page container, change something, that also we did. So both the case the page change happened. This is the first way. It's like href directly tell the destination, mean this draft a path and show the destination, let it land. Programmatically also you can do that. That part we will see it maybe tomorrow. So now I drafted a path. Now let me see what is exactly happening to my code. Now if I click it, I went into the second page. By default it has added a previous page title. I think I have to modify the title. So when I click it here, it went to the second page. By default back button is telling that okay, this is the previous page. By default it has added the required navigation page. It is like, once you go into that, you can even swipe it to go back. Not necessary to click the button. You can simply with one hand swipe back. It's a Cocoa Touch, those framework. Okay, so it's pretty easy. You can add as many pages, keep going, navigation, add a lot of things, create new designs. A simple way of creating, not we yet to write even a single line of our Objective-C code. But with the storyboard itself, substantial amount of user experience can be created. Let me add a title. I'm not able to select it. If you are not able to select, you can drag a navigation item. It will give you a control to a title. That's what by default it has to be there. So let me put a page. You can add as many as navigation controllers or view controllers, not navigation controller. As many as you can keep on giving a link. So add a bar button. And hold it, command, control, tell the navigation and launch it, connection. Your keyboard, command and control. This is a Mac keyboard, please. Command equivalent in your keyboard is a Windows key. Okay, these guys have given you a Windows keyboard. That's wrong. In fact, they should have given you an Apple keyboard. But at least, if I say command mean, make sure you are pressing the Windows key and then control key, and there is a control key by default is there for you. And once you select and you release up, take your mouse slightly move, you will have a segue drafted for you. I mean, this small thing will come. Tell the destination and then it will draft you a link. Sorry, this one is beautiful. So if you want to define an identifier, define it, otherwise leave it. Let me see. Page 1, page 2, and I can go back, swipe. Here, simple hello world application created. Pretty simple. Creating user navigation is one of the best in iOS. Like how you use your paper, your creative idea, same way you can create your coding here. And this is one of the best in my experience. Even though it's a little clumsy, you would need a larger screen to do it. You know that even it's still a large screen, but I have to zoom and do a lot of stuff. If you have a large screen, you can do it excellently. But okay, it gives us a clear idea like what we are going to plan on how we are going to design our application. Same student record application is going to come here. Same stuff we are going to do it here. Login, add a table, all the stuff. We have a table controller, table view controller. We have everything here. What we did in HTML5, we are going to do the same in iOS. Having a concept rendered from there, and we are going to do it here. Afternoon, this is your task. Get used to it. Segue drafting. Since I said easily, you may have a little difficulty to get used to it. Get used to it. Tomorrow onwards, I'll slightly get into data types of Objective-C and other stuff, like programmatic control of view controllers. We will do it. And iOS, pardon? It's not window. Convention, make sure it's the view controllers. All the three are view controllers. This one view controller, second view controller, the third view controller. You have 3 pages, 3 view controllers. And this first view controller, we had an object representation of this class. If you notice this one, view controller. But for these two which we added now, does not have a class representation or object representation. For that, I'm going to do right click, which is not needed, but I'll try to tell you. Selecting, it looks like my project is located here. Right clicking, new file, make sure Cocoa Touch class. You're trying to create a class, telling that page 2 view controller name. Make sure the subclass is selected UI view controller and click next. It will ask you where you want to save it. Save it in the default place wherever required. Now if you notice that it has added header and the implementation file. Now go to your storyboard. Tell, okay, this is the page 2. Select that particular page 2 and tell page 2 view controller is a responsive representation. Now anything happens to this particular page will listen, or this class will listen. If you really want to compare with your HTML5, this storyboard gives you a HTML representation, whereas this one gives you a JavaScript representation. Trying to see, because how we connected them into the same single file, in this case it is not possible. So we create a view object separately and connect it to the runtime object in this way. So like that you have to create another view controller called page 3 view controller and connect it to the third page or third view controller by selecting the yellow dot and define the view. Make sure you first create the class, then only the drop down will list it over here. Otherwise, you don't try to hard code anything. Once you create your file, it will automatically appear. This is a convention. It's a very starting point. Spend your time to get used to it. The entire afternoon I'll give it to you. It will take some time. It's not problem of you, it's your keyboard. It's going to give me a lot of trouble. But okay, we'll have to get used to it. Learn the shortcuts. Like the simulator had a lot of shortcuts, I remember. So that also get used to it. Thankfully I have my trackpad. I could do it, but the same may not be possible for you. So get used to it. So at least we got a simple multi-page or multi-view controller design. So where we can drag and drop various designs. So text input I can bring it, button I can bring it, checkbox I can bring it, anything I can bring and do a control over in JavaScript, sorry, ObjectiveC. Then stuff. Okay. And we'll also have a core data and other stuff to be implemented in the future sessions. This is a very starting point. I've already taken you some 10 minutes of your lunch break. So